So, what was your biggest challenge when you migrated to MongoDB? What was the biggest challenge that you faced?
Yeah, so the fact that it was MongoDB was probably, we would have had this problem anyway, but anytime you do a data migration with a web service that's on 24/7, it's a pretty complicated thing to do. Yeah. You have to go through a lot of steps, where at first we're reading and writing to Postgres, and then we have to write to both of them and make sure that all these writes are consistent, and that's very, very easy to get wrong. And then when you're absolutely 100% sure it's consistent, you move your reads over to MongoDB, and then you stop writing to Postgres. And it's a very, very tricky to get right. And in the interim medium stage where you're doing kind of twice as much work as you were doing before, it's very, very annoying and very complicated. So you try to do it as fast as possible just because it's too much of a headache to be in that intermediate stage, and it really slows down your product development a lot.
Would you have done anything differently, or would you have implemented anything differently today if you knew now what you knew then?
Oh gosh,
or if you knew now
I'm sure I would have done some things differently. What comes to mind? There's a lot of things that we did a little bit wrong where our objects are taking up more space in memory or on disks than they would have if we had built them a little bit more compactly. It didn't matter so much when we only had 50 million check-ins, but we're approaching 1 billion check-ins, and you start multiplying by bigger numbers, and small mistakes start to matter a little bit. And it's also very hard to change these things. If we wanted to change how we store check-ins at this point, we actually do want to make that change, but it's just it would be a huge project to undertake, which again would take away from product development. One of the great things with MongoDB, we actually spend a relatively small percentage of our engineering resources on infrastructure-related tasks. We probably spend about 75% of our engineering resources building the product, and only 25% on building the infrastructure. And that's maybe a little bit close to the edge, but we're trying to really be innovative when the product. So the fact that we can kind of send all our resources in that direction is super helpful.
That's great. And have you seen anything as far as, obviously, like you said, if you'd picked the wrong product, or if you hadn't been able to scale the way you wouldn't be sitting here right now. Foursquare wouldn't be around. I think a lot of us remember, Twitter, 2008, 2009, had a lot of problems scaling, and they were fortunately still here. But you guys haven't had
we've had a few.
You've had a few,
all right.
but it hasn't been to the level where people might get on Tumblr and complain about Foursquare being down, but it's not to the level where you have to where you become a meme of sorts. Can you attribute that, do you think, directly to your decision to go with MongoDB?
Certainly using MongoDB has been very helpful, not just because of the technology, but also the support we get from 10gen is fantastic. Dwight and Elliot and his crew are really, really committed to helping people that use their software to succeed. So that's been super helpful. And then honestly, I give most of the credit to my engineering team. I don't really write code anymore, and it's really, they're the ones that make it happen.
Cool. And is there anything cool coming up, maybe on the back end or technology-wise, coming on with Foursquare you wanna share with us?
Yeah, I can't really get into the product direction too much, but when it comes to technology, we really, a lot of the features that we want to do in the future have less to do with kind of actively taking your phone out of your pocket and pressing buttons on the screen, and more doing things automatically, which will dramatically increase the number of requests to our servers by a factor of 100. And thinking about how to do that from a technology perspective, keeps me up at night sometimes.
Cool. So basically, you're saying that when I walk into a place and I'm there for a certain period of time, if I wanted it to, my phone could automatically check in. Perhaps. Cool. All right. Thank you so much.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are you implementing Mongo in a cloud situation, or are these dedicated servers? Because I didn't understand when you were talking about EC2.
So we're hosted 100% on Amazon EC2. But it's certainly the cloud, but we use their largest instances where you actually get the whole machine, and they are relatively stable. It's not like they're disappearing, every minute. More or less we get a machine and we keep it for the long term. Right. So we actually, obviously Foursquare has very much to do with location. A huge percentage of the objects we store come with a lat long. And it's, again, one of the reasons we went with MongoDB is they have this built-in where it's very easy to do geo-related queries. And we're using that for a lot of things for a long time. We still use it a little bit, though we're also getting to the point where we're rolling some kind of custom solutions as well. And then, wait, your second question. Oh, archived versus new data. You can always get to all of your data on Foursquare. You can go back to the beginning of time and see your first check-in. So we don't really differentiate between it that much. But you know, in essence, you're probably going to look at your most recent check-in a hell of a lot more often than your check-in from 2 years ago. So, you know, it just doesn't need to be loaded into cache necessarily, though for certain reasons it does a lot of the time. That was probably confusing. Talk to me after.
I just have a question, and either Michael or Harry could answer it really, but maybe we both have a different answer. But, you know, everyone likes to talk about the big data, and I guess, you know, there's transactional problems, but then on the analytics side, you know, have you found any particular affinities in terms of, or have you found anything useful, and have you found that any technology was able to help you?
For analytics? Yeah, so I don't know about Michael, but we actually have a whole separate analytics system where primarily we're just storing a bunch of JSON and files that we store on S3, and then we're using Hadoop to do map reduces over them. It's fairly straightforward. A lot of other companies do the exact same thing.
Excellent.
That's not SQL.
That's not SQL. That's true. Yeah, let's see. Off the top of my head, I'm going to go with hundreds of gigabytes. We're probably not at it, you know, maybe at a terabyte, terabyte and a half.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yep.
So, and if you guys have questions, we'll have time for questions after we conclude the rest of the panel. So